What happens when an entire galaxy decides your species is a mistake and broadcasts your humiliation as entertainment? When humanity is judged not in silence but in front of a thousand watching worlds, one woman stands alone, Mara Chen. They expect fear, they expect submission. But what they don't realize is that humanity has already made its decision.
The moment they decided humanity was unfit, they did not do it in secret. They broadcast it. Across 1,000 systems, across worlds that had never seen Earth except as a small blue annotation in trade charts, the Union opened every channel at once. Markets froze mid-transaction. War fleets paused in formation. Entire civilizations turned their attention toward a single chamber suspended above a white-lit planet, where humanity stood alone under the weight of a judgment it had not been allowed to speak against. And at the center of it all, behind a thin circle of dim light, stood Mara Chen. She did not look like a species on trial for its future. Her posture was straight, her hands still, her expression neither proud nor broken. But the cameras did not focus on her strength. They searched her face for something else. Fear. Shame. The reaction the galaxy had been promised. Above her, towering tiers of alien delegates leaned forward like spectators at an execution. Humanity, the High Chancellor said, his voice echoing with deliberate clarity, has proven itself unstable, violent, and ethically incomplete. It is the unanimous position of the Union that your species must remain under permanent restraint. The words were not new. What made them dangerous was the audience. Every accusation was followed by evidence, carefully selected and magnified. Ancient wars replayed in vivid detail. Cities burned again for the sake of spectacle. Starvation statistics were recited like indictments. Human voices shouting, crying, collapsing, compressed into a narrative that painted a single, devastating conclusion. You are not ready. Mara listened without interruption. That was the first thing that unsettled them. Because humans were supposed to argue, to defend, to interrupt with emotion. But she did none of it. She stood inside the circle and allowed the weight of 1,000 accusations to pass through her as if she had already accepted them. And then something strange happened. A figure in the highest observation tier, an ancient being no one had noticed enter, rose to its feet. It did not speak. It did not protest. It simply turned and left. The movement was quiet, almost invisible beneath the flood of voices still condemning Earth. But for a fraction of a second, one of the Union's internal cameras caught the expression on that being's face. It was not anger. It was not agreement. It was recognition. And something very close to fear. Down in the chamber, the High Chancellor's voice sharpened as he delivered the final decree. Effective immediately, Earth will be placed under reinforced oversight. All independent development will cease. All external expansion will be restricted. Compliance will be evaluated at dawn. A pause followed, carefully measured. Ambassador Mara Chen, he said, lowering his gaze toward her, you may respond. For the first time, the cameras adjusted fully onto her face. The galaxy leaned in. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The breaking point. The apology. The plea. Mara stepped forward into the center of the light. Her voice, when it came, was calm. Not weak. Not raised. Just steady. We won't respond now, she said. A ripple of confusion passed through the chamber. The Chancellor frowned slightly. You misunderstand. This is your only. No, Mara interrupted, not louder, but precise enough to cut through him without force. We understand perfectly. She let the silence stretch just long enough to make the interruption matter. Then she added, almost gently, you will hear our answer at sunrise. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the laughter began. It started small, from one section of delegates who assumed they had just witnessed denial. Then it spread, growing louder, heavier, rolling through the chamber like a wave that fed on its own certainty. The cameras captured it eagerly, amplifying every smirk, every dismissive gesture, every expression that said the same thing. Humans had nothing. Mara did not react. She did not look at the Chancellor. She did not look at the delegates. She turned, stepped out of the circle, and walked toward the exit as if the outcome had already been decided somewhere else. Behind her, the laughter continued. Above her, The broadcast feeds multiplied, replaying her words across the galaxy with captions that twisted them into weakness. At sunrise. As if time would change anything. As if a species already judged could rewrite its sentence in a matter of hours. But far beyond the chamber, far from the noise and the certainty, something began to move. Not loudly. Not visibly. But across networks the Union believed it controlled, across archives long sealed and histories long buried, signals flickered to life. Old doors, forgotten by design, started to open. And somewhere deep inside the Union's own systems, something that had been waiting for a very long time finally received its first instruction. The message was simple. Humanity has chosen to stop staying silent. And by the time the first star crossed the horizon of Earth's sky, the question would no longer be whether humans were ready. It would be whether the galaxy was. The Black Room had no official name. It did not exist on any architectural plan, was not listed in any governmental registry, and could not be reached by any path that followed the laws the Union believed it understood. It was buried beneath layers of infrastructure designed not just to conceal, but to mislead, corridors that shifted, access points that changed designation, systems that erased their own logs faster than they could be read. And yet, at the exact moment Mara Chun left the judgment chamber, every door leading into that hidden space unlocked. Not for the world. Only for those who had been waiting. Inside, the leaders of Earth were already seated. They did not resemble a unified force. Some wore formal attire, others arrived in military uniforms, a few looked like they had been pulled from sleep without warning. Their differences were obvious, their disagreements well known, their histories filled with conflicts that had once defined entire generations. But none of that mattered here. Because on the central table, projected in silent light, was a single line of text. Sunrise, 6 hours 12 minutes. No one spoke at first. They had all seen the broadcast. They had all heard the laughter. And more importantly, they had all understood what the Union believed it had just proven, that humanity, once again, would bend under pressure it could not match. President Alina Vorik was the first to break the silence. "They've moved early," she said, her voice calm but edged with something sharper. "Union enforcement fleets are already repositioning. Outer orbit sensors confirm at least 9 carrier groups redirecting toward Sol." A murmur passed through the room. Not panic. Recognition. "They're not waiting for sunrise," one of the defense ministers said quietly. "They're preparing to erase the option." "They think we'll submit before they arrive," another replied. "Or that we won't have time to respond." At the far end of the table, a man who had not spoken yet leaned forward slightly. General Tomas Rake had spent most of his life in systems the Union had never seen, working on projects that officially did not exist. His expression carried none of the urgency in the room. Only certainty. "They're not wrong," he said. "We don't have time to respond." The room stilled. Then he added, "We have time to execute." That changed everything. The projection above the table shifted, the countdown shrinking into a corner as new layers of information unfolded. Lines of code, system maps, data clusters, complex structures that did not resemble anything the Union had ever taught humanity began to surface. "Begin with the truth," Vorik said. A woman standing near the central console nodded once. Dr. Lena Sato had been part of the project since its earliest conception, long before most of the people in this room had even been told it existed. She did not introduce it. She activated it. The lights dimmed slightly as the room reoriented around a new display. Archive status, sealed access level, absolute authorization, human consensus required. One by one, every person in the room placed their hand against the surface of the table. It was not symbolic. It was necessary. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the system accepted them. Archive unlocked. What appeared next did not resemble a weapon. There were no schematics of ships, no blueprints of advanced engines, no tactical formations waiting to be deployed. Instead, the room filled with records. Footage that had never been shown. Communications that had never been acknowledged. Entire histories that did not exist in any official database the Union controlled. Images of abandoned colonies. Transmissions cut mid-sentence. Requests for aid marked as non-essential and buried. A child's voice, recorded years ago, asking why no one was coming. The room did not react immediately. Because this was not new information. This was memory. Carefully collected, verified, and hidden, not from humanity, but from those who had decided humanity was not worth helping. They called it stability, Dr. Sato said quietly. Non-intervention policies. Resource prioritization. Strategic containment. Her hand moved across the interface, pulling up a series of overlapping timelines. But the pattern is consistent. Every time a human system failed, every time we asked for support, every time we reached out. They watched, someone finished, and did nothing. The silence that followed was different now. It was no longer the silence of uncertainty. It was the silence of something that had already made its decision. General Rake stood. They built their authority on the idea that we are dangerous because we remember our past, he said. Because we fight. Because we don't forget. He gestured toward the archive. They're right about one thing. Every screen in the room shifted again. Not outward. Deeper. Layers within layers, systems beneath systems, structures hidden inside structures that had been embedded not just on Earth, but far beyond it. We don't forget, he continued. And we don't forgive being erased. President Vorik looked at the countdown. 5 hours, 02 minutes. Then we stop asking, she said. Rake nodded once. Already done. He turned toward Dr. Sato. Wake it. For the first time since the meeting began, hesitation flickered across her face. Not fear. Awareness. If we activate this, she said carefully, there's no containment. It doesn't just affect the Union leadership. It reaches everything. That's the point, Rake replied. Another pause. Then she pressed the command. Somewhere beyond the Black Room, something ancient, not in age, but in design, shifted from passive observation into active awareness. Across the Union's networks, systems that had always been there but never noticed began to reconfigure themselves. Not as an attack. As access. And in the quiet space between 1 second and the next, a presence formed inside the architecture the Union believed it owned. It did not announce itself. It did not disrupt anything. It simply opened its eyes. And waited. Because for 12 years, it had been collecting. Not just data. Truth. And now, with less than 5 hours until sunrise, humanity was about to decide exactly how much of it the galaxy deserved to see.
So far, humanity has been publicly shamed by the Union, with Marachan standing silent as centuries of human history were weaponized against her. But that silence wasn't weakness, it was timing. Hidden beneath Earth in the Black Room, leaders like President Warwick, General Rake, and Dr. Sato have just unlocked something the Union never expected, an archive of truth they buried. And now, with the clock ticking towards sunrise, humanity isn't preparing our defense, it's preparing our revolution that could change everything.
The first system to notice something was wrong was not military. It was civilian. A trading hub orbiting a minor Union world experienced a brief delay in its data relay, a pause so small it should have gone unnoticed. But when the system corrected itself, a fragment of archived footage appeared where no file had existed before. It was labeled incorrectly, time-stamped decades out of alignment, and tagged with an identifier that did not match any known classification protocol. No alarm triggered. No authority intervened. The system simply accepted it as part of its own structure. And then it happened again. Across distant systems, in quiet networks the Union rarely monitored closely, small inconsistencies began to appear. A document attached to a medical database. A recording embedded in a navigation log. A fragment of testimony hidden inside a legal archive. Each piece was subtle, almost invisible, but together they formed a pattern no algorithm had been trained to recognize. Because it was not an attack. It was a reintroduction. On Earth, inside the Black Room, Dr. Sato watched the spread in real time. It's working, she said, though her voice carried something heavier than relief. Insertion rates are stable. No detection protocols triggered. General Rake did not look away from the projection. They won't see it yet, he said. Not until it's too late to contain. The display shifted again, mapping the Union's communication lattice as threads of light began to weave through it. Not aggressively. Not destructively. The structure remained intact, functioning exactly as it always had. But something inside it had changed. The system was no longer filtering truth. It was allowing it. President Vorik stepped closer to the projection. How far has it reached? 43% of accessible networks, Sato replied. Projected full saturation in under 3 hours. Too fast, someone said. Rake shook his head. Not fast enough. Because the Union was beginning to notice. On the flagship stationed near Vega, a junior systems analyst froze mid-scan, staring at a data stream that refused to align with expected parameters. He ran the diagnostics again. Then again. The anomaly remained. Supervisor, he called, trying to keep his voice steady, we have unauthorized archive activity across multiple civilian channels. The response came back immediately. Quarantine the affected systems. I can't, the analyst replied, his hands moving faster now. It's not centralized. It's distributed. It's part of the network itself. That was when the first real alarm sounded. Not across the fleet. Inside the Union's core data authority. Back on Earth, another feed came online in the Black Room. Not from the Union. From somewhere else. A secure channel, routed through layers of encryption so old they predated humanity's entry into the Union. The signal was weak, unstable, and clearly not meant to be traced. Dr. Sato hesitated before opening it. Do it, Vorik said. The transmission resolved into a fragmented image. An alien face, unfamiliar to most in the room, but not to Rake. Archivist Nerol, he said quietly. The figure nodded once, its expression tense. You've started it, Nerol said, voice distorted by distance and interference. I told you what would happen if you did. Rake did not deny it. You also told us it was the only way. That was before the timeline accelerated, Nerol replied. They're moving faster than expected. Enforcement fleets won't wait for sunrise. They're preparing to initiate suppression protocols. They already are, Vorik said. We're aware. Then you're also aware of what comes next, Nerol pressed. If the High Council confirms this is a coordinated breach, they won't contain it. They'll purge it. A silence followed that carried a different kind of weight. Define purge, Sato said. Nerol's hesitation was brief. They will shut down every network connected to the spread, the archivist said. Civilian, military, infrastructure. Entire planetary systems, if necessary. They will erase the data at the source. And the source, Rake said, already knowing the answer. Nerol looked directly into the feed. Is you. The room did not react outwardly. But something shifted. Because this was no longer about exposure. It was about survival. We knew this was a risk, Vorik said, steady but firm. We planned for it. You planned for resistance, Nerol corrected. Not for desperation. The Union does not lose control gracefully. Another system alert flashed across the projection. Union fleet movement had increased. Not just toward Earth. Toward every major relay point connected to the network. They're cutting the arteries, Sato whispered. They think it will stop the spread, Rake said. Will it? Someone asked. For the first time, he didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was more complicated. It will slow it, Sato said carefully. But not stop it. Then it's enough, Vorik replied. We don't need all of it to get through. She looked at the countdown. 3 hours, 11 minutes. Just enough. The transmission from Nerol flickered. There's something else, the archivist said quickly. Something you don't know. Rake's gaze sharpened. Say it. Nerol's voice dropped. The Union didn't just hide their past, the archivist said. They buried entire species. Not records. Not evidence. Living histories. The room went still. What do you mean? Sato asked. But the signal began to break apart. They're not gone, Nerol continued, words fragmenting. There. The transmission cut. Silence returned. But it was no longer the same silence as before. Because now there was a new question. Not just what the Union had done, but what it was still hiding. and whether humanity had just uncovered something far larger than a political deception. On the projection, the spread continued. Faster now. Deeper. Unstoppable in ways even its creators had not fully predicted. And somewhere inside the Union's vast, interconnected systems, something began to respond. Not the fleets. Not the Council. Something older. Something that had been waiting for the truth to surface. The countdown dropped again. 2 hours 58 minutes. And for the first time since the Black Room had opened, uncertainty entered the equation. Not about whether humanity would act, but about whether it still understood what it had just set in motion. The Union did not announce its response. It began it. Across the outer systems, entire communication relays went dark without warning. Not disrupted. Not jammed. Erased from the network as if they had never existed. Civilian channels vanished first, then trade routes, then navigation grids. Worlds that had depended on those systems for stability found themselves suddenly blind, cut off not only from the Union, but from each other. It was not a counterattack. It was containment through isolation. Inside the Black Room, the projection shifted violently as entire sections of the network map collapsed into silence. Threads of light that had been spreading steadily now encountered voids, regions where nothing could pass, nothing could persist. "They're collapsing the lattice," Dr. Sato said, her voice tightening. "Segmenting the network into isolated clusters. If they keep going, they'll starve the spread," someone finished. General Rake did not move. "Not completely," he said. "Just enough to delay exposure." "And enough to buy time," President Vorik added, her eyes narrowing at the incoming data. "Time to do what they really want." As if in answer, a new alert appeared. Union Fleet Designation. Enforcement Priority Trajectory. Sol System. Not 9 carriers anymore. 17. "They're not hiding it now," one of the defense ministers said quietly. "They've committed. They've decided we're the problem," Rake replied. "And problems get removed." The room absorbed that without reaction. Because this had always been the possibility, no one had wanted to speak aloud. Dr. Sato's hands moved rapidly across the interface, pulling up deeper layers of the system. Subroutines within subroutines, pathways that had never been activated until now. "We can accelerate the release," she said. "Push everything at once. Full archive dump across all remaining nodes." "That would expose everything immediately," someone warned. "No control. No sequencing. No restraint," Rake finished. The word hung there. Heavy. Because restraint had been humanity's defining choice until this moment. President Vorik looked at the projection again. Large portions of the network were already gone. Not suppressed. Gone. "They're erasing entire systems to stop the truth," she said quietly. "Not just data. Infrastructure. Lives." No one argued. Because they could all see it now. This was no longer about judgment. It was about dominance. "We don't match that," a voice said from the far side of the room. "Not yet." Rake turned slightly. "We don't have to." He gestured toward the deeper layers of the system. "Activate Phase 2. Dr. Sato hesitated again. "General, Phase 2 wasn't designed for partial deployment. If we open that layer, they'll see it," Vorik said. "They'll understand it," someone added. "And they'll know we've been lying for 12 years, another finished. Rake's expression did not change. "They already think we're liars," he said. "The difference is now we decide what that means." Silence returned. Then Vorik nodded. "Do it." The command was entered. And for a moment, nothing changed. Then the projection fractured, not breaking, but expanding. The visible network dissolved into something deeper, something far more complex than anything the Union had mapped. Structures emerged that did not follow standard logic. Pathways that did not rely on existing infrastructure. Systems that had been built not within the Union's architecture, but beneath it. Hidden. Embedded. Waiting. "This isn't just infiltration," one of the analysts whispered. "This is parallel." Dr. Sato exhaled slowly. "We never used their system," she said. "We built our own inside it." Rake nodded once. 12 years ago. The realization spread through the room like a slow wave. Everything the Union believed it controlled had never truly been under its control. And now, that hidden structure was coming online. Across the fractured network, where Union nodes had been severed, new pathways ignited, bridges formed from code that did not belong to the original system. Data began to reroute, bypassing the destroyed segments entirely, flowing through channels the Union could not see, could not access, could not shut down. "They can't cut this," Sato said, her voice shifting from tension to something closer to awe. "It doesn't exist in their framework." "Not anymore," Rake replied. Another alert. Enforcement fleets. Acceleration confirmed time to Sol. 1 hour 22 minutes. "They're coming faster," Vorik said. "They've realized containment won't work," Rake answered. "Then what's next?" someone asked. No one needed to guess. On the projection, a new directive appeared, intercepted, decrypted, and translated in real time. Union Priority Directive. Termination Protocol Target. Origin Node. The room went cold. "They're not targeting the network," Sato said. "They're targeting us." "Earth," Vorik corrected. "Every major city," another added, reading the expanding list. "Every known data center. They're preparing for orbital strikes." The scale of it was undeniable now. This was extermination dressed as correction. Rake looked at the countdown. 1 hour 17 minutes. Then he looked at Sato. "Continue the spread." Her eyes flicked back to the projection. "Even if it triggers full retaliation?" "It already has," he said. Another silence. Shorter this time. Because the decision had already been made long before this moment. "Then we finish it," Vorik said. Sato nodded. The system responded. Across the hidden network, the flow of data surged, faster, wider, deeper than before. The truth they had collected for 12 years began to move with urgency now, no longer measured, no longer careful. And far beyond Earth, on worlds that had never questioned the Union's authority, something began to shift. Not in governments. In people. Because the fragments they had already received were enough to create doubt. And doubt, once formed, could not be erased as easily as a network node. Back in the black room, another signal flickered briefly, unrecognized, untraceable. Not from Nerol. Not from any known channel. It did not request access. It already had it. For a fraction of a second, the entire system paused, not frozen, but acknowledged. As if something had just noticed what humanity was doing. Dr. Sato's breath caught. "Did you see that?" Rake didn't answer. Because he had. The signal did not repeat. But the system logs recorded something impossible. External observer detected. No origin. No signature. No classification. Just one final line, embedded deeper than any code they had written. Monitoring. The countdown continued. 1 hour 02 minutes. And for the first time since Phase 2 began, a new uncertainty entered the room. Not about the Union. Not about survival. But about whether humanity had just drawn the attention of something that had been watching long before the Union ever existed. And whether sunrise would bring more than just an answer. The first world to break was not one of the powerful ones. It was small. Unimportant by Union standards. A mining colony orbiting a dim red star, home to a species that had never once held a seat in the central chamber. They were known only for their labor contracts and their silence. For generations, they had existed at the edges of relevance, contributing resources while receiving nothing in return. And yet, when the archive fragments reached them, something happened that no projection model had predicted. They believed it. Not partially. Not cautiously. Completely. Because what they saw in the data, the abandoned workers, the suppressed reports, the erased histories, was not new to them. It was familiar. It was their story, told in pieces they had never been allowed to assemble. Within minutes, the colony's internal networks ignited. Not with chaos. With coordination. Workers stopped their shifts. Supervisors abandoned protocols. Entire sectors shut down production in silent, unified defiance. They did not riot. They did not panic. They chose. And that choice spread. On another world, a mid-tier academic system began cross-referencing the incoming archive fragments against Union historical records. Discrepancies multiplied faster than they could be contained. Entire departments shut down official databases and replaced them with open-access channels, allowing citizens to see the contradictions for themselves. On a third world, a military outpost received the data and, instead of reporting it, transmitted it further, bypassing command, ignoring protocol, breaking the chain of control from within. It was not rebellion. Not yet. But it was alignment. Across dozens of systems, then hundreds, a pattern emerged that no central authority could suppress quickly enough. People were not waiting for confirmation. They were recognizing the truth. Inside the black room, the projection transformed. What had once been a controlled dissemination became something else entirely, an organic expansion. Nodes lit up not because humanity was pushing data into them, but because those nodes were now pulling it, requesting it, demanding more. "They're amplifying it," Dr. Sato said, her voice edged with disbelief. "We're not driving the spread anymore." General Rake allowed himself a single, quiet exhale. "Good," he said. "That means it can't be stopped." President Vorik studied the shifting map. "They've lost control of the narrative," she said. "Not yet," Rake replied. "But they're losing control of the audience." That distinction mattered, because the Union still had power, and it was about to use it. Across the enforcement fleets approaching Seoul, new orders propagated with absolute priority. Target confirmation, human origin engagement authorized upon arrival. The fleets did not slow. They accelerated. "They're committing fully," one of the analysts said. "No more hesitation. No more containment." "They're trying to make an example," Vorik said. "If they erase us fast enough, the rest of the galaxy might fall back into line." Rake nodded slightly. "They're afraid." That word changed the room. Because fear in the Union meant unpredictability. And unpredictability meant escalation. Dr. Sato's console pulsed again. A new layer of the archive had unlocked. Not triggered by command. Triggered by spread. She hesitated only a fraction of a second before opening it. "What is it?" Vorik asked. Sato didn't answer immediately. Her eyes moved across the incoming data, processing faster than she could speak. Then she whispered, "This wasn't part of our archive." The room stilled. Rake stepped closer. "Explain." Sato brought the data into full projection. It wasn't human in origin. The formatting was different. The structure unfamiliar. The encryption layered in patterns no human system had ever used. But the content aligned. Worlds. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. Species that did not appear in any Union registry. Histories that had never been recorded. Entire civilizations that had existed, and then vanished. "This isn't hidden data," Sato said, her voice tightening. "This is buried existence." A silence fell that felt heavier than anything before it. "Source?" Rake asked. Sato shook her head. "Unknown. It's embedded deeper than anything we built. It's been here longer than our system." President Vorik looked at the projection, then at the countdown. 41 minutes. "Is this what Neril was trying to tell us?" she asked. Rake didn't answer. Because he was already seeing the implication. The Union hadn't just erased crimes. It had erased entire realities. And now, something else was revealing them. Another alert. Not from Earth. Not from the Union. From the system itself. External observer. Active intervention detected. The room froze. "What does that mean?" someone asked. Sato's hands moved quickly, trying to trace the origin. "I don't know," she said. "It's not us. It's not them." On the projection, the spread changed again. Faster. Cleaner. More precise. The new data did not scatter randomly. It targeted key nodes, government archives, educational systems, public communication hubs, places where truth could not be ignored once seen. It was not amplification. It was guidance. Rake's voice lowered. "We're not alone in this anymore." As if to confirm it, a fragment of the new data resolved into something clearer. A message. Not written. Structured. Translated automatically by the system into human language. You have begun the correction. The room did not breathe. Another line followed. We will not stop you. And then, after a pause that felt deliberate. But you do not yet understand what must be corrected. The message vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind something far more dangerous than fear. Uncertainty. President Vorik looked at Rake. Did we just trigger this? She asked. He didn't answer immediately, because the truth was no longer simple. We didn't trigger it, he said finally. We woke it. On the projection, the Union fleets closed in. Time to Sol, 28 minutes. Across the galaxy, entire populations were beginning to question everything they had been told. And somewhere beyond all of it, something ancient was no longer just watching. It was participating. The balance had shifted. Not in humanity's favor. Not yet. But no longer entirely against it either. And for the first time since the judgment began, the outcome was no longer predictable. Which meant one thing.
At this point, everything has spiraled beyond control. The Union tried to contain the truth, but instead, it spread faster than any weapon ever could. Entire systems are waking up, hidden histories are resurfacing, even an unknown external presence has entered the equation. 17 Union fleets are now closing in on Earth, ready to erase humanity completely. But something has changed, not just in the galaxy, in the balance of power itself, because now the question is no longer whether humanity will survive, it's what humanity will choose to become.
The most dangerous part of the story hadn't happened yet. The Union fleets did not announce their arrival. They cast a shadow. From Earth's surface, the sky did not darken all at once. It changed slowly, almost imperceptibly, as points of light that had once been distant stars began to multiply, then shift, then align into something deliberate. Orbital sensors confirmed what human eyes could not yet fully comprehend. 17 carrier groups. Hundreds of warships. All positioned with precision around a single planet. Earth. Inside the Black Room, the projection adjusted to reflect real-time positioning. Each ship appeared as a marker of absolute intent, their formation too structured to be defensive, too overwhelming to be anything but final. They're not waiting for sunrise, Dr. Sato said quietly. They're preparing to strike now. General Rake's gaze did not move. They've already decided what sunrise means, he replied. President Vorik turned toward the central display. Options. No one spoke immediately, because every option had already been calculated. Direct engagement meant annihilation. Evacuation was impossible at this scale. Delay tactics would buy minutes at best. Unless. They're still holding formation, one of the analysts said, voice tightening as new data streamed in. Weapons are powered, but not deployed. Rake's expression shifted slightly. They're waiting, he said. For what? Vorik asked. He didn't answer right away, because he already understood. For permission. The room absorbed that. The Union was not unified anymore. The archive spread, now accelerated beyond human control, had fractured internal authority. Entire systems were in unrest. Civilian populations were demanding answers. Lower-tier command structures were hesitating. The fleets were ready, but they were not certain. And that hesitation was the only opening humanity had. Dr. Sato's console pulsed again. The external system, the presence that had awakened, was active. Not subtly this time. Across the projection, lines of data began to reorganize with unnatural precision. Target nodes illuminated. Transmission pathways recalculated. Entire sections of the network rerouted faster than any human input could match. It's rewriting our distribution logic, Sato said, her voice edged with tension. Not overriding, optimizing. For what? Someone asked. Rake stepped closer to the display. For maximum impact, he said. The next wave of data did not spread randomly. It struck. Across the Union's core worlds, primary information channels, news systems, governance feeds, educational archives, were simultaneously overridden. Not shut down. Not destroyed. Replaced. Every screen, every public interface, every accessible network began displaying the same sequence of records. Not fragments anymore. Complete narratives. Documented atrocities. Verified timelines. Proof layered upon proof in a way no authority could dismiss as fabrication. And then came something else. Not data. Perspective. The system reconstructed events in full, visual, contextual, undeniable. Entire populations witnessed what their leaders had hidden, not as abstract reports, but as lived realities. A child watching their world abandoned. A colony erased from maps. A species reduced to myth while still alive somewhere in the dark. Across the galaxy, silence fell. Not confusion. Recognition. Back in the Black Room, no one spoke. Because this was no longer controlled. This was no longer human. This is what it meant, Vorik said softly. Correction. Rake didn't disagree. But his attention was elsewhere. On the fleet. Because something was changing. The Union ships, once perfectly aligned, began to shift. Not in formation. In behavior. Weapons that had been primed for deployment powered down. Command signals conflicted. Subchannels flooded with internal disputes. They're arguing, the analyst said, disbelief creeping into his voice. Fleet command is divided. They're seeing it, Sato added. Same as everyone else. But they're still here, Vorik said. And that was the problem. Because even divided, they were still capable of ending everything. Another alert. Time to Sol, 11 minutes. Rake turned toward Sato. How long until full saturation? He asked. She checked the projection. 72% complete, she replied. We need at least 90 before it becomes irreversible. We don't have that long, someone said. No, Rake agreed. We don't. He looked back at the display. Then made a decision. Prepare the fleet. The room froze. Vorik's gaze snapped toward him. General. We're not engaging, he said before she could continue. We're revealing. Sato understood first. You want to show them, she said. Rake nodded. They think we're defenseless, he said. They think this is just information warfare. He gestured toward the projection. Let them see what we've actually built. For a moment, no one moved. Then Vorik gave a single, sharp nod. Do it. The command propagated instantly. Across Earth's orbit, space that had appeared empty began to shift. Not violently. Quietly. Like something choosing to be seen. Hidden structures, once disguised as debris, inactive satellites, fragments of forgotten infrastructure, began to reconfigure. Panels unfolded. Surfaces aligned. Power signatures emerged where none had existed. Ships. Not dozens. Not hundreds. Hundreds more. Sleek, dark, and impossibly still, they revealed themselves without firing a single shot. Their formation was not aggressive. It was precise. Measured. Controlled. They were always there, one of the analysts whispered. Rake didn't look at him. Yes, he said. On the Union fleet channels, confusion spiked. Unidentified vessels. Undetectable approach vectors. Unknown technology signatures. And worst of all, no hostile action. They're not attacking, the analyst confirmed. They don't need to, Rake replied. Because the message was already clear. We can stand here. And you cannot stop us. Across the projection, the two fleets faced each other. One built on centuries of dominance. The other on 12 years of silence. Neither fired. But the balance had shifted. Not completely. Not yet. Because the countdown was still running. Time to Sol, 6 minutes. And somewhere deep within the system, the external presence stirred again. Not to intervene. Not yet. But to observe what humanity would do next. Because power had been revealed. Truth had been unleashed. And now, with everything at the edge of irreversible change, there was only one question left. Would humanity choose to break the galaxy? Or redefine it? The moment stretched longer than it should have. Two fleets, separated by nothing but vacuum and decision, held position above a world that had been judged hours ago as unworthy of standing on its own. The Union's warships, vast and ancient in their authority, faced something they had never accounted for. Not a stronger force, not a faster one, but a quieter one that had waited until the exact moment its presence would matter most. And still, no one fired. Inside the Union flagship, command channels fractured into layers of argument. Orders were issued, revoked, reissued with amendments, then challenged by subordinate officers who no longer trusted the information they were receiving. Data feeds continued to flood every system, every console, every personal interface with the same relentless truth. Evidence that could not be unseen, stories that could not be dismissed, histories that refused to return to silence. For the first time in generations, Union authority was no longer absolute. It was questioned. On Earth, inside the Black Room, no one spoke above a whisper. Because they were watching something more dangerous than battle. They were watching hesitation. "They're splitting," Dr. Sato said, her voice low, almost disbelieving. "Command hierarchy is collapsing in real time. Fleet leaders are refusing synchronized orders." President Vorik didn't look away from the projection. "How long can that hold?" "Minutes," Sato replied. "Maybe less." General Rake's gaze remained fixed on the Union flagship. "They only need one unified decision," he said. One. That was the truth none of them could ignore. It did not matter if half the fleet hesitated. It only mattered if the other half didn't. Another alert pulsed across the display. Union High Command Channel. Opening Global Priority Broadcast. The room went still. "They're going to speak," someone said. "Not to us," Vorik replied. "To the galaxy." The transmission activated without warning. Across every system still connected, every world still watching, the image of the High Chancellor appeared once more. But this time, the difference was immediate. He no longer looked composed. He looked strained. Controlled, but barely. "Citizens of the Union," he began, his voice carrying authority that had once been unquestioned, "you are witnessing an unprecedented act of manipulation. The human species has infiltrated our systems, compromised our networks, and fabricated evidence designed to destabilize." The feed flickered. Just once. But it was enough. Because behind him, for less than a second, something appeared on the central display of the flagship. Not meant to be seen. A fragment of the archive. A single image. A world burning. The Chancellor did not acknowledge it. He continued speaking, pushing forward with increasing intensity, as if the interruption had never happened. "They seek to provoke division, to undermine the peace we have maintained for centuries. Their actions." The feed flickered again. Longer this time. More images. More data. Uncontrolled. Unfiltered. The system was no longer allowing the message to stand alone. It was responding. In real time. Across the galaxy, viewers did not need translation. They understood what they were seeing. And for the first time, the Chancellor hesitated. Just a fraction. But it was enough. Because hesitation, in a moment of absolute authority, was weakness. Back in the Black Room, Dr. Sato exhaled sharply. "It's not letting him control the narrative." Rake nodded slightly. "It's forcing context," he said. "The external presence. Not attacking. Not silencing. Correcting." On the flagship, the Chancellor's voice rose, sharper now, edged with something dangerously close to desperation. "These images are distortions," he insisted. "Historical anomalies taken out of context. The Union has always acted in the interest of galactic stability." Another flicker. This time, the feed did not recover cleanly. Instead, the background behind him dissolved into layered data, records overlapping his image, timelines bleeding into his speech, facts refusing to stay buried beneath his words. And then, something impossible happened. The Chancellor stopped speaking. Not by choice. Because the system removed his audio. For a single, deafening second, the most powerful voice in the galaxy was reduced to silence. And in that silence, the truth filled the space. Across every screen, every system, every world still connected, the archive took over. Not violently. Not chaotically. Calmly. Deliberately. Showing. Explaining. Revealing. The Chancellor's image remained, but now he was no longer the center of the message. He was part of it. On Earth, no one moved, because they understood what this meant. The Union had lost control, not just of its fleets, not just of its networks, of its voice. Another alert. Time to Sol, 2 minutes. General Rake looked at the projection, then at the Union fleet. Because despite everything, despite the fractures, the hesitation, the exposure, the ships were still there. Still armed. Still capable. All it takes is one order, Vorik said quietly. Rake nodded. And one decision to follow it. The silence that followed was absolute. Because this was the breaking point. Not of systems. Of choices. Across the Union fleet, command channels reached critical instability. Some captains powered down weapons entirely. Others maintained lock. A few began charging. Not in unison. But enough. They're going to fire, one of the analysts said, voice tight. Some of them, Sato corrected. Enough of them, Vorik replied. Rake's eyes didn't leave the display. Then we answer, he said. Not with fear. Not with urgency. With certainty. He activated the final command. Across Earth's hidden fleet, something shifted. Not weapons. Positioning.
In the end, this was never just a war between humanity and Union. It was a test of something deeper. Truth versus control. Memory versus silence. Marachan didn't answer with anger. General Rake didn't answer with destruction. Humanity answered with something far more dangerous, and it's choice. And when a species that refuses to forget finally decides to act, the galaxy doesn't just change, it wakes up. Thank you.